The White House this year hosted its first ever reception to celebrate Korea's autumn harvest festival, Chuseok. On this edition of Issues and Insiders, we delve into this event and its broader implications. Hello and welcome. You're watching Thursday's edition of Issues and Insiders for September 26th here in South Korea. I'm Min Sunhee. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with the founder of the Korean American Community Foundation, one of the organizers behind this year's first ever Chuseok celebration at the White House. Kyung Yoon, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Right. Kyung Yoon, let's begin with details about the first ever White House Chuseok reception that took place this month. Do tell us about the event itself and what it included and how it began.
Well, I really need to acknowledge all the many people and organizations that were behind something as historic as this first Chuseok celebration. First and foremost, it really was the leaders of Korean American leaders within the White House that include Philip Kim, who's the special assistant to the president and the director of political engagement at the White House. There was also Pa-Wi Rivera. His name doesn't reveal, but he is biracial Korean. He is in the Department of Intergovernmental Affairs. We have a number of Korean Americans, Dan Ko, who's the Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the White House, Todd Kim, Assistant Attorney General at the Justice Department. And I think this really shows that it's not going to be about one person. It's that we are reaching a place in America now where Korean Americans are forming critical mass in politics, in business. You know, we have the quintessential doctors and lawyers that all of our first generation parents wanted us to become, but we are much more than that. We have actors, we have tech leaders, we have media people, we have philanthropy. I want to also acknowledge Jumi Song of the Siegel Family Endowment, who was one of the leaders behind the scenes and helping to make this possible. So it was really exciting to be in a room ultimately with about 100 Korean Americans who represented all these different industries and geographies. They came from around the country, but it was a diverse group. It wasn't necessarily an elite group. It was regular community people, military service members, artists, young people. There were students of traditional Korean dance and music who performed. It was a joyful, joyful occasion.
Right, Kyung, ordinary people at this extraordinary event at the White House. And that being said, what can you tell us about the implications of this inaugural reception at the White House for the broader Korean American community there?
Well, I think what you heard so many people talk about was that as Korean Americans, many of us first generation or that sort of 1.5 generation like me, who was born in Korea, came to America at a young age, but then also second generation, we did not really grow up with any expectation or idea that the White House is also our house. I think for me, I came to America when I was 6 years old. I want to say my family did not immigrate to America. My father was actually with the Foreign Service for Korea, but I grew up near Washington, D.C. because he was at the embassy there. And so I have many memories as a little girl, like driving by the White House, driving by the many monuments in Washington, D.C., and never thinking that those were for people who looked like me. And I think that is something that when the doors of the White House opened and it was celebrating our holiday, our tradition, there were so many beautiful hanboks in the White House. There were people were into it, you know, they dressed up And I just remember walking behind this group of women, and they were sort of swishing, in their hanboks down the halls of the White House. There was a moment in the program where this military officer, she was a female American military officer of Korean descent. She had a beautiful voice, and she began to sing Arirang. And I think for the halls of the White House and that room to be filled with the music that was our history and our song, our culture, our memory, and something that is so deeply Korean, it was an incredibly emotional moment for us to be experiencing that in the White House in the United States of America.
Right. Kyung, are such receptions to celebrate diverse cultural heritages common at the White House?
Yes, I mean, the White House, has opened the doors, for many different occasions. I think, for St. Patrick's Day or for, celebrating other European heritage. I think it's relatively recent that we are seeing, Asian American. Last year, I was privileged to be invited to the White House for the first Lunar New Year celebration. So this was, not just a Korean celebration, but something that was more Pan-Asian. But you have to remember that last year it was the first time that the White House had such an occasion. So then this year to be focusing on something that is so uniquely Korean, to have our Chuseok celebration at the White House, I think it was just very, very historic. And I do think that it is beginning to recognize the growth, and not just in terms of population and generations, but about the influence and the contributions of Korean Americans to the greatness of this country. I think sometimes we hear narratives that are talking about, how immigrants just come to take from America, but this is the ultimate kind of testament to show that Korean Americans, we are contributing in so many ways. We are building businesses, we are building and contributing philanthropically. That is something that my organization, the Korean American Community Foundation, has been leading, to be a place where Korean Americans can show up as a force philanthropically, which is very important. And I think that we're also seeing, of course, the rise of Korea and the global power of K-pop, K-beauty, K-dramas that are such an influence. It's so popular now. Everybody wants to learn Korean language. So we are riding this wave, not only of Korea rising, but also Korean Americans organizing and rising as well.
Right, and perhaps in light of that, and also to mark the first Chuseok celebration at the White House, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, I understand, sent congratulatory messages. What did they say, Kyung?
Well, they really talked about how Korean Americans are making such a contribution truly to America, and the importance of our cultural heritage, and that they're really recognizing the growing social and political influence of Asian Americans and Korean Americans at this time. And, this is an important election year as well. And we are seeing, a rise in civic engagement and participation of Korean Americans, and broadly, Asian Americans are the fastest growing ethnic group in this country. So I think this is a kind of nexus of many important influences that are kind of cresting in a wonderful way right now.
Right. Broadly speaking, Kyung, what has been the impact of stronger Seoul-Washington relations under the Yoon and Biden administrations on Korean Americans there in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, I think that it was really thrilling for Korean Americans that President Yoon paid a state visit to the White House very early on in his administration, that we do see strong ties between South Korea and the U.S. and a real commitment of both countries to, keeping our relationship very, very solid, and also the U.S. recognizing the geopolitical importance of Korea and in that region. And so I think for many Korean Americans who still have relatives and ties, and even though many of us, don't even speak Korean that well or did not grow up did not grow up there, that we still care very deeply about the stability of the region, and that it's so important that the U.S. and Korea and South Korea keep a strong commitment to each other.
Right, of course. Earlier on, Kyung, you spoke about how the Korean Americans there in the U.S. are forming a critical mass. And that being said, what can you tell us about their presence in the political arena in recent years?
Well, I think that we are at a really interesting time. We have Representative Andy Kim of New Jersey. He's a congressman. He is one of 4 Korean American congressional leaders, but he is poised to become the first Korean American senator in history. And nothing is a done deal, but he is really showing a lot of strength. And, he is on track to be elected in November. And then just across the country, we're seeing more and more Korean Americans throwing their hat in the ring for congressional seats. But not only that, in their state assemblies, as state leaders in their Senate and in their assemblies, but also here in New York in our city council. In the past 2 years, we had our first ever 2 women, but first ever Korean Americans elected to city council. And so we're really seeing that they are able to work together from the city council to the state. We have Assembly Member Grace Lee, we have Assembly Member Ron Kim. This is an important time for not just Korean Americans, but I think Asian Americans, especially as we experience the corona pandemic and the rise of anti-Asian hate and violence. We're seeing that this is an important time for us to speak up and to show our not just our clout, but really our voices, and to raise it together. And so in New York, for example, last year, Governor Hochul signed a bill that gave an unprecedented $30 million to the Asian American community, and that we'll be distributing out to nonprofits that are serving many, many Korean Americans as well. And I was recently appointed by Governor Hochul to her first ever AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander Commission, that is going to be an advisory commission to her. And so we're really thrilled to be working together with her.
Right. Kyung, as you mentioned, the U.S. it's looking ahead at a major political transition with the presidential election in November, on November 5th, that is. How are the campaign rallies affecting the Korean American community?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that, no community, and certainly the Korean American community, is monolithic. And that means that we are diverse. People have different points of view. And yes, we are bonded by being with our Korean American Korean heritage, but we can share very different views. So there is a broad range, and just like in the broader U.S., we do have some polarization that exists within our own community. But I think what's really exciting is that there is an increasing recognition and empowerment that regardless of your political affiliation, it's critical for Korean Americans to actively participate in the democratic process, and whether it's through voting or certainly voting, but also engaging in civic discussions or advocating for policies that affect our lives. More and more Korean Americans are realizing the power of organizing and having a voice. And I think I really believe that our participation matters, and that we do have a role to play in really shaping the future of the United States and ensuring that diverse needs of our community are heard and addressed. I think, for first generation immigrants, often it's really about keeping our heads down and staying quiet and just trying to get a foothold, in a new country and learning the language and just trying to survive. But I think for many of us, and really, we are thankful for the sacrifices of our parents and often that first generation that allowed us to be able to get an education, to be able to not face barriers of language or opportunities. And I think that is why we need to not forget about our Korean communities or our heritage. And the goal is not for us to just assimilate into America and forget where we came from. But I think organizations like the Korean American Community Foundation, and I want to also lift up the Council of Korean Americans, CKA, that co-sponsored the Chuseok celebration with us. And there are many organizations that are working to make sure that that Korean Americans, as we are constantly evolving and changing, that we are embraced and not lost to the Korean community, and that we can continue to forge bonds. And I love the Korean word "정." "정" is something that is impossible to translate into English, but we all recognize that as Koreans and as Korean Americans, that there is something in relationships and "정," and that we can be lifting each other up, and also to be incredibly supportive of each other.
Right. And speaking about organizations, Kyung, could you tell us a bit about your foundation, the Korean American Community Foundation, which also was one of the organizers of the Chuseok celebration at the White House? How did you find, what was the basis for its founding, and what are its objectives and services?
Yeah, so we are in our 22nd year, so it's hard to believe, but it was in the fall of 2002 that I was one of a group of Korean Americans that came together actually at the invitation of the then Consul General Won Il-cho, and who was interested in getting together Korean American 1.5 second generation leaders from different industries. And we were invited to a dinner, and we began to have a conversation around the needs also of the Korean community. I think it's really easy sometimes to focus on how the successes of our community, which there are many, and we're very proud of that. But I think in America, there is something called the model minority stereotype. And just like any stereotype, it can be something that is complementary, but at the same time, it erases the fuller and more complicated and frankly messy picture of our community. And so we have wealth, we also have poverty, and we have successes, and we have struggles. So we want to not try to sweep the struggles under the rug, and deny them. We need to get resources to help those who are vulnerable and needing support. So one of the things is that we realize that, if we as Korean Americans don't step up to help, for example, our senior citizens, Korean seniors, they face 1 in 4 lives in poverty in America. They face incredible barriers of lack of English and all of the things that means, that you cannot access services and so on. So there are good community-based nonprofits that are in proximity to our vulnerable neighbors who are doing amazing work, and yet these organizations also do not get much funding, and they're invisible to mainstream foundations. That's why we started KACF 22 years ago. We, as a group, the founders came together, and we really dug into our own pockets, and but also asking our friends and our networks to donate together. And that first year in 2003, we raised $60,000, and we were very proud to take that money and give 5 grants of $12,000 each to organizations that were helping low-income and vulnerable neighbors in our community. But when we fast forward now 20 years, last year, 2023, we hit $14 million in grants. And we have been showing over time and over just with steadfastness that we can get into the practice and good habit of not just thinking about getting, which is we're really good at, getting into the right school and getting a good job, but also thinking about true success as a human being, but also as a community. It's more than getting, it's about giving as well. And so I feel that what KACF and some of the pictures you were just showing is of our Giving Summit, which just took place in Los Angeles just a week and a half ago. We were setting this large table for Korean Americans to come together and have those conversations, because sometimes people think it's really hard to make money, but it's easy to give it away. But actually, if you're thinking about, not just charity, but really about investing in change together, it requires strategy.
Right.
And
right, Kyung, I have to agree. It's more about giving, for sure, for sure. I'm afraid, Kyung, that's all the time we have for this talk, but thank you so much for your inspiring words today.
I was very happy to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Right. Well, on that note, we end Thursday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time on Friday.